So hi, Jim.
Hello, George.
Welcome to the pod. It's great to have you here today. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Yeah.
Brilliant. So let's kick it off. Why don't you just give me an overview of who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I have run my own businesses really since the late 80s, so longer than I'd like to remember. But essentially, my background predominantly has been in financial services. Predominantly what I do is very small business owners and medium-sized businesses on a range of different things. But that's a reasonable summary of what I do.
Brilliant. So I know a bit about you already, but why don't we go right back to the start of your career? Where did it all begin?
Well, like most things, it didn't begin where I thought it was going to begin, and it certainly didn't go from there to where I thought it was going to be. I studied in engineering in Northern Ireland, where I grew up. There was no work, so I ended up moving to England in the 80s, really just to find a job, and ended up in a job with nothing to do with engineering. I ended up running a youth club for 2 years.
Nice.
And then at the end of that, I decided I'm going to go back into engineering, and was about to join the Air Force as an engineering officer. Got injured on the day before my medical, and one of those revolving door moments. I had to find a job to pay the bills, and applied to a job which was advertised as a management trainee. And I thought, yeah, I can do that sort of stuff. I'm pretty good at leadership. And then 3 weeks, I was in London on a training course, learning a script of how to go and sell life insurance. So there I started, and from that point, I ended up with a 30-plus year career in financial services. But that's how it all started.
Wow. So your career nearly went in a completely different direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's probably true of most things in life. I think it was Woody Allen that said, if you want to make God laugh, show me your plans. So we typically end up doing things we hadn't quite anticipated we were going to be doing.
Definitely. And I think it's important to remain open to the doors when they open, for sure. So tell me, what was it like going door to door? What did you learn from that experience of sales?
It was probably the best sales training you could ever possibly have. That combined with the fact that I think the company who hired me to do it also had some real fundamentals of sales training that literally were true then and are equally bit as true today. And I guess throughout the whole of my career, every time I've stepped away from the basics, I've literally learned or relearned in many cases the lessons of why it is you stick to the basics.
And what were some of those basics? Could you outline some of the skills you learned there?
Yeah, I think showing up is number one. The number one job in business, in any business, is to get and keep customers.
Yeah.
So if you're not prospecting, you're never going to keep getting customers. The bit that I see business people missing all of the time is that they never really understand the process of what they're doing, from meeting someone to them becoming a customer or a client or a purchaser of their product, whatever it happens to be. And I think if you understand the process step by step, never try to jump beyond that step. So, and that happened many times. I learned that many times trying to sell life insurance door to door. Where if I thought someone said, yeah, I'm interested, you try to sell there and then never worked.
Yeah.
So it's understand what you're doing is, so in that instance, it was very much a meet someone, get them to give you an appointment, and then come back and have an appointment where you had the opportunity in an appointment to actually take them on the journey of being interested in what it is you're trying to get them to do. But if you try to jump that step, it never works.
Yeah, it's that saying of just keep it simple, stupid, go through the process and follow. It works.
Yeah,
sure. So it wasn't long, from what I understand, before you transitioned from the sales to running your own sort of financial services business. Talk me through how this evolution came about.
Regulation, I guess, as much as anything else. So I was working inside at one of the, back then, which was one of the main companies selling life insurance independently on behalf of insurance companies. So it was a brokerage environment. And they had about 200 sales guys across the UK. And which was pretty substantial, in terms of what they were in terms of the operation. And then regulation came in the 1980s, which literally polarized the advice world in terms of you either had to be a representative of a particular company or you could become independent.
Yeah.
So I was essentially running my own business, but I was still working on a self-employed basis. But the key difference was that when regulation came in, the company who I was working with, it decided that they wanted to go and become the representative of a single insurance company. And I felt that my career would be better if I was to be independent and be able to work with any insurance company. Yeah. So that's what made me set up and form my own business at that point.
Interesting. Yeah. Regulation forces you to adapt, certainly. And I think that a lot of opportunity comes from that sort of environment. And so you grew this business over time, from what I understand, to a team of around 8 people. What was this transition like?
Um, Again, it wasn't planned. I think you learn on the journey. I mean, in a sense, was really, if I look back at what I did, I started out on my own. Then I got clients. I'd meet some of my peers who I was thinking, why are you guys earning more money than me? And it was, typically because they had other people who were working underneath their company or working within their company, also selling. I thought, well, that seems like a good idea. So I then went about just building the company, having more advisors come through the company, and then you build a business up with staff and advisors, and it grows. I don't think that was planned. I didn't set out with a plan and said, okay, I want to go from 0 to 10 or 12 staff. So I had 8 advisors, and I think then I had 4 support staff. So it was a firm of about 12.
Yeah, no, quite substantial. And it's interesting how that evolution just happens over time. I'm sure, you saw demand and you needed to grow to meet that demand.
I don't even think it was I was that clever.
Yes.
If I'm being really honest, I think it was just that this is working, let's do more of it. I was inspired by people who I saw that were more successful than me. So regularly it was a question of surrounding yourself with the people you want to become. So it's that, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. These are all phrases I learned later in life. At the time, I did that wasn't planned. That was just what I did without realizing. I just kind of thought, I want to get closer to that guy. He seems to be better than me, so I'll go and spend some time with him, or I'll try and work out what they're doing. So it wasn't because back then I was a scholar of reading business books, or there was no such thing as podcasts or things like that. I mean, you just literally, it's just how it happened.
No, it's interesting. And that's definitely something I live by as well, as, you're a product of the people you surround yourself with. And I think it's so important to pick these people, above you, that you aspire to be, and you can learn from them. And so you got involved with Bancor, I believe, with your advisory practice. Talk me through what the agreement was that you reached, who Bancor were, and sort of how it unfolded.
Okay, so my firm was a financial advisory firm.
Yes.
And as a result of regulation, first coming in and then continuously changing, there was a demand in the marketplace for companies providing regulatory support and help to those advisors with regards to what they're doing. So Bancor was one of those. Bancor was a company that literally formed to provide help and support to other financial advisors. And I met them through thinking, I need some help and support. So I went and met them, liked the way they were doing things. And the conversation pursued where I then became part of what it was they were doing. So I took on a role to help them build and grow their business by recruiting other financial advisors.
Yeah. And I think this agreement, from what I'm aware, marks quite a significant point in your sort of career journey, because was it eventually with Bancor that the capital event came about?
Absolutely. That was a fairly major capital event that when they eventually then got purchased and sold, I was one of the shareholders in that business through the work that I'd done in the preceding 6-7 years. And that was significant.
What was that event like? I mean, it's something that most people aspire to, is this exit, selling off. Yeah. How did you find it?
It was life-changing, because from a financial perspective, it was my first ever proper capital event where, I got to the point where I was earning good regular income, but it's the first time I ever had a sort of a sizable capital amount that changes my life, changed the way you think. And probably changed the way I wanted to do business moving forward from that point as well.
Interesting.
So the experience of having a capital event, not always correctly, but it certainly encouraged me to potentially look for other ways of building capital in the future as opposed to just income. So there's an interesting balance in business between income producing businesses and a business that will produce a capital event for you, and one or the other. So not easy to get right. And I don't know that I ever have, to be fair.
No. And what would you say some of the key success factors are in a successful capital event? Is there anything you look out for in terms of timing or particular businesses?
For me, it's timing. Everything is timing. And when I say timing, it's not your timing, because, like, for instance, when we sold Bancor, it was because there was yet another regulatory change potentially going to happen. That in turn inflated significantly the value that businesses like Bancor had in that marketplace.
Yep.
And therefore we received a significantly greater multiple on sale than we would have done had it not been for that proposed regulatory change. Now, that regulatory change subsequently didn't happen, but nonetheless, the timing of just recognizing this is a great time to sell, because the wind's blowing in favor of people want to acquire a business. So I often say to people that in business, people say, oh, you were lucky, or, I had some good luck, or I had some bad luck. I think most business owners, without any shadow of a doubt, give it everything. They sacrifice lots of things to do it, and are genuinely very good at whatever they went into business to do in the first instance was.
Yep.
So all of those factors and ingredients have to be there for any business to have any opportunity of succeeding. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to sacrifice. You're going to wish you never did it on occasions. All of those things. But the key thing that equals a successful exit is the timing of other events happening around you that you have no control over. So world events, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's the 2008 banking crisis or whatever it is, you can look and, time and time again, there will always be global events which will impact on what sale of your business. And even as we're speaking here, I mean, next week we have a budget, and it's been rumoured that there are going to be significant changes to capital gains tax and going to be potential removal of business relief for entrepreneurs, etc., in terms of where they're going. So doubtlessly, within the last 3-4 months, or since Labour have come into power, there'll be lots of businesses who are saying, well, it's time to sell this business because afterwards might be too late. And I'm certainly aware of that happening. So those are recognizing timing that may say, okay, let's just trigger going on and selling the event. But timing, absolutely, for me is the key. All the other bits you've got to do anyway.
Absolutely. And I think what you said there about recognizing timing is really important, because I think one of the examples I heard was Yahoo. I think they had a sky high valuation in the early 2000s. Google put in a bid for X billion. I declined it thinking they could get more, and years later it decreased by tenfold. I think you've got to recognize when the timing's right.
Yeah. And, greed is never a good reason to sell a business. And probably, I always say to business owners, I say, look, the absolute best time to sell your business is when you think it's the worst time to sell your business.
Yes.
Because the person who's purchasing you, they've got to believe, and actually not just believe, it should also be true. There's got to be a hell of a lot in it for the next guy.
Yeah.
And too many business owners think, well, it's about me getting the most out of it for me. Whereas actually, it isn't. For you to actually achieve getting the most out of you, there genuinely really has to be probably even more in it for the guy who's buying you than there is for you.
Yeah.
And so if you can go in it with that mindset, it will transform your opportunity of a successful exit.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Let go of that sort of greed slightly and just accept the process.
I don't think people see it as greed.
Yeah.
I think they just see it as, well, I want true value for what I've built up. But what they're not recognizing is that, but what's in it for the other guy?
Yeah.
And any good business deal, whether you're buying, selling, or just transacting, always when it's good for both parties.
Yeah, definitely.
A bad business deal when it's good for one and not good for the other.
It's very hard to let go of something you've built from the ground up.
I think those are other factors. Yeah. There's a whole range of factors that get involved as to why people make decisions to either sell or not sell. It isn't just valuation, and it isn't just because they can sell. But that will be a lot to do with business owners understanding the motivation of why they're in business, and certainly where they want to go from that point, and what would they do post-business sale. It's a decent challenge in itself.
Definitely.
What worth the rest of my life look like?
And what did the rest of your life look like? So, you mentioned that your mindset shifted slightly after that capital event and you were looking to approach business in a different way. How did you choose to allocate your capital? What were the steps that you made next?
I think I made a few mistakes after that, because I'd recognized and saw the wonderful benefits that a capital event could do.
Yep.
So I went in pursuit of other businesses I went in pursuit of other activities through business that I thought that could create another capital event. And because I had the luxury of being less dependent on income, I probably made the mistake of just focusing too much on what future capital event might be. There's no such thing as an easy way to make money in that regard. Yes, you can become an angel investor, and most angel investors, go into it with their eyes open and then recognition that there's a good likelihood that not all the businesses they invest into will work. I learned that the hard way in terms of I invested in some businesses that didn't work, and I thought, fine, because you think because you've been successful once and because you've had a success, that's likely what's going to happen the next time. And it just doesn't always work like that. So because you're then relying on other people you're investing in and their ability in business and And are you actually overseeing it to the extent you should? Have you made the judgments properly on the basis that you should? So that was certainly an element of some of the mistakes I made. Some of the things that turned out to be not necessarily mistakes, but they turned out as very good learning experiences.
It's definitely true. I think venture capitalists, they say it's only like 1% of their businesses truly make it to that unicorn status, and only 10% actually make a return on the investment. You have to be prepared to just make a loss and try things. What were some of those lessons that you learned looking back on those business ventures? Would you mind sort of talking us through what they were?
There'd be many. Many.
Yes.
I think what would be fair to say is that when I was younger, probably had, I don't want to say arrogance, but I had a bit of a blindness that basically permitted me to go on and achieve and succeed. To the extent that I used to think, well, I kind of know what's the right thing to do, and I've always felt what was right.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I think I genuinely recognized there's so many things I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so many things to learn.
Yeah.
So many things to learn from other people. I learned a lot more as a result of some of the subsequent bad decisions that were made, to then learn from those and to go on and create and build other things. Got to be the right chemistry with the people you're going into business with. You've got to be an alignment of business principles in terms of what you're trying to achieve. People is the key thing. I think if you can believe in the person or you can believe in other people, then you have a much greater opportunity to succeed. One of my biggest failures was probably came about as a result of being in business with someone that I shouldn't have been in business with. Yeah. My gut told me not to be in business with them. My greed said, that's a great opportunity. I had the little greed bug that sort of sat on his shoulder saying, okay, go for it. And I did. And that was painful financially. And I extricated myself from that eventually. But that was believing in your gut, understanding people, and going with it. I mean, you're never going to agree with anyone else on 100% on anything. You've got, even your best friends you don't agree with on things. So, but it's just the core ethics, I think, of someone that you're going to be working with.
Yeah. I think it's incredibly important to pick the right business partner. And as you say, it's often hard to gauge that before you trusted your gut, but it's hard to know who's the right person before you really get off the ground and start with them.
Yeah, and I think key lessons I've always learned and continue to learn is how to walk away from things quicker.
Yep.
So, because the problem is that when you've made a decision to do something, and if you've invested in it and you've put money into it on time, is that you want to make it work naturally. That's an obvious thing to do. And therefore, it's being able to walk away from something when you think that's never going to work quicker. So if you can reverse out of something at a faster pace, I think that's significantly more beneficial than just trying to keep making it work. Those would be the things that probably would have softened the blow of some ultimate things that didn't work.
Definitely.
And I apply that all the time now. I'm very happy to walk away from things when I think, actually, it's a great opportunity, but I don't have to have every great opportunity for my life. I just have to enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that you need to put your pride behind you and sort of just accept sometimes where you've made a mistake, throw back on it and take a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to stand away from something and be objective whenever it's, because if you were part involved in the idea, and you've got to believe in something for it to work. If you don't believe in something, it's never going to work anyway. So if you believe it's going to work, you will want to pursue it. I think the ability to have external coaches or people who this goes back to the surrounding yourself with people you like and whether you call them coaches or mentors or things like that. I think everyone, whether they officially hire someone and pay them to do it, or they just use a friend or they use a seasoned opinion of someone who's been there before, that's fundamental. I mean, that to me, the ability to listen to other people who know better or know more or know things you don't know or can help you to see the wood for the trees in terms of where you are is key.
Definitely. And have you had mentors throughout your career?
I have. It's like the point I made earlier. I literally sought them out from really early on, but I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I didn't think, I'm going to go and find a mentor. Yeah. I mean, I find that regularly now. I do a lot of business networking and, the room's full of 1/3 of the people in the room are coaches or mentors.
Yes.
And a lot of young entrepreneurs trying to set out in business think, I need a mentor because it's almost like they've read, I need a mentor that's going to help me. And I didn't think like that. I mean, I literally, all I knew is that who could I learn from? Who could help me with things I didn't know? And that's in all aspects of things. So yes, I did seek out mentors, but I didn't think that's what I was doing. I literally just wanted to learn from people who I thought could stop me making more mistakes.
Yeah, it came about just quite naturally.
Yeah, I mean that's the definition, I guess, of what a mentor is. I would probably be more proactive in doing that today, as opposed to just doing it without realizing I was doing it when I was younger.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you and I met through a networking event just a few weeks ago. Yes. So you had these series of less successful ventures. Sort of, how did you pick yourself up, get back on your feet?
Of course, you're never proud of something that doesn't work, but I'm proud of the fact that I've become out of that, learning a whole lot more and being a lot better to move on to doing other things. And I am passionate about helping business owners and helping them proceed in terms of what it is they're doing. So I have had quite a few other successes along the way.
Yeah.
And really it's just dusting yourself down. Sometimes you just got to get on the bike again. Get up, go again. Get up, go again. It's as simple as that. Remain positive. Do things that you think, everything's about creating a solution for where there's pain in terms of business. If you genuinely think, I can think of a better way of doing that, I think there's another way that could be done better than currently other people are doing it, then and if it's a great idea, go for it, and do it. I love the enthusiasm of young businesses. There are huge amounts of naivety that sit amongst people in business because, I think in the world we live in today, there seems to be a culture of people thinking they should just have things because of it. When I was a kid, I didn't even know what the word entrepreneur meant.
Yes.
And everyone thinks, I want to grow up and be an entrepreneur. What they really mean is that people who they've seen on television as being super wealthy are entrepreneurs, and they think, I'm going to be one of those.
Yes.
And whereas literally, it's not a job title. It's a description of something where someone's been successful in building something. And I think it's important to help other people recognize that, listen, this is not an easy gig. Yeah. I often say many of the networking events I go to, I say there's a bit of tough love in this, but perhaps you're better suited to having a job.
Yeah.
Than actually to try and build them. Not because I'm trying to put them off, but because if they just have no understanding of what you're putting yourself up for, because not only are you putting yourself up for all of the pain of making a business work, no one paying you a salary, dealing with other staff, trying to find new customers, and then you got this continuous thing sitting on your shoulder with which all rules, regulations, compliance. You've just signed up for all those things the minute you've gone into business. Yeah. And they change all the time. And we've got a new government in at the moment, and it looks like there's going to be significantly more changes with regards to responsibility for business owners. So you have to recognize that's part of what it is to own a business and to be in business, as opposed to just being good at what you're good at.
We discussed earlier, a certain amount of naivety is really important when starting a business, because you've got to be prepared to just have this mad idea and actually take a stab at it. And I think Elon Musk described starting a business as eating glass. Some of the pain you experience is much more than you'd ever appreciate, but you've just got to be prepared to a little bit of naivety and just diving in there, but also, as you say, some realism in terms of the challenges we're going to face.
Yeah, I think so. Naivety is fantastic.
Yes.
The beauty of naivety, you just go out and do it because that works. And remember, I was at a conference, and John Caldwell, the guy that built Phones for You, he was the guest keynote speaker at this conference. It was overseas, Morocco, and the auditorium was full. There was over 1,000 people there for him as the keynote speaker. Yeah. And he hadn't floated the business at that point, but he had taken a couple of $100 million off the table in terms of selling some of his private shares, and was about to float and become, as we now know, one of Britain's wealthiest billionaires. And so everyone was massively inspired. Oh God, this guy's going to be hugely inspiring. What's he going to tell us all? And honestly, it was probably one of the worst presentations I think I've ever seen. The guy, it could not have been less inspiring. And at some point during that presentation of his, because I was thinking, there's going to be these words of wisdom, we're going to learn a lot from him. Yeah. And suddenly the penny dropped with me, which is, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, the basics really genuinely, really, really work. And he put a slide up with him on a bicycle. And he said, you know what, guys, 4 years ago, I decided I wasn't fit. And I decided, I'm going to cycle. And he said, and you know what, from that day to this day, including birthdays, Christmas, I said, even today, he said, I cycle every day. Yeah. And fundamentally, that's the thing. That's what makes the difference. When you know something works, the difference between someone like him and like the vast majority of everyone else is, he does that every single day. Yeah. Doesn't matter how tedious, how boring, whatever it is, that's what it is you need to do to get results. And most people don't do that. You know, it's like the New Year diet. You know, you do really well for a couple of days, or I'm going to go to the gym more, and then you stop doing it. The really successful people, they just don't stop. They just almost as blind ignorance, and that's the point about that. It's not so naivety is one way of doing it. The other bit is just this complete blind ignorance of, no, if I keep doing that, that's going to work. That's going to work. And, you know, my first sales manager, when I was selling life insurance, you know, he used to beat it into us every day. It's a numbers game. You know, if you need to hit 10 doors to sell one policy, if you want to sell 10, you need to hit 100 doors.
Yeah.
Now, it sounds like the simplest thing in the world, but do you know how many people stop at 20 or 30 because they got fed up? And then they didn't succeed. The ones that succeed are the ones that just keep doing it again and again and again. So it's part naivety and it's part just blind doggedness where they're just, I'm not giving up. I'm doing this. So that has to be there. So whether you're Elon Musk or whether you're Richard Branson or whatever it is, those guys just don't stop.
Yeah.
They literally don't stop.
Definitely. And I think there's so many examples, as you said, of entrepreneurs that have just stuck at it over and over again. They've had no said to them so many times at pitches. And that's the key differentiator, just sticking with it and pushing through.
Yeah. And it's, you know, you got to have, it's like people with if you have an addictive personality.
Yes.
It's about creating the focus for your addictions. You know, one of the best movies I always remember watching was The Wolf of Wall Street.
Yes, classic.
And you know, you got to look at the drug addictions and the alcohol addictions and the things that those guys were up to. But that addictive personality, that doggedness was, right, you know, we need to get the most out of everything we do. We're just going to do it. We're going to live life to the full. We're going to have this much. We're going to do that. And it was just, because that's what you wanted to do. This is what if you knew what needed to be done to do it, then you would do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to lose some weight. I just know I need to eat less. Do I eat less? Yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. You know, whereas the difference is if I actually eat less today, I'm going to achieve it. So it's not complicated, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
Because you've got to keep doing it.
Yeah, definitely. And so you mentioned earlier, one of the key areas you've looked at to start your businesses from is solving a problem. And do you think that's how most entrepreneurs these days should start out? Find a problem out there in the market and just set about solving it?
I think the simple answer is yes.
Yeah.
Whether you go out looking for problems to think you can solve them, I don't know that that's necessarily right. I think if you've experienced the problem without looking for it, that's when your imagination will come up with a solution, because you're going, well, why do they do it that way? Question often that people should be asking is not, well, why should someone do this? But it's, well, if you turn that on its head and say, well, why should we not do this? Why should I not do that? If you can exhaust all the reasons why someone shouldn't do something, then there's no other reason left for them to not do it.
Yeah.
So I think that's also key. I mean, right from my first sales script that I learned, you know, it always, the close was always, is there any other reason whatsoever why you're not able to proceed with me right now? Because if you've removed all the reasons to not do something, the only thing left to do is to do it. So I think that's key. But just going looking for problems to say, oh, well, where's there a problem? And then I'll go and try and find a solution for it. I don't think that really works. I think you've probably experienced something where you just think that could be seriously improved.
Yeah.
And then if you genuinely can provide the best painkiller to do that, then fine.
Absolutely. And that actually reminded me of a story. I was reading Steve Jobs' biography recently, and I think when he was looking to sell Pixar to Disney at the time with Bob Iger, they started off by just saying, why shouldn't we do this? And Steve listed out all these ideas, and Bob was like, well, there's no way we can possibly get over all these hurdles. And they worked through them one by one and ticked them off, and it was one of the biggest acquisitions that happened at the time. And I think that's, as you say, a great way to start. Think about, why shouldn't we do this? And then how can we overcome all these challenges? And then you have to do it.
I think so. It's kind of, that all ties into selling as well. Because most people I meet who think they're in sales, they're in the telling business, not in the selling business.
Yes.
So they try to tell you, you should do it because of this reason, do it because of that reason. So they're trying to give you all the reasons to do something. Whereas people will do something whenever they feel, well, it's mad not to do it.
Yeah.
Why? Well, I'd be an idiot not to do this. And they'll only do that whenever they've exhausted all of the things that they'll find as reasons to not do it. We all try to find reasons not to do things. If you go shopping you can go out deliberately looking to buy a pair of shoes or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
And you walk into a shop and you'll see it and you think, yeah, they're perfect. And then you go, just check a couple of other shops just to make sure they're not cheaper down the road.
Yeah.
Or I'll come back and check online or whatever people do in terms of, and really what they're doing is they're trying to find a reason not to buy it. But even though they know they need it,
Yeah.
So whereas if once all those reasons have been removed, if they're sitting there and they've actually checked online and got, yeah, it's not cheaper anywhere else. These are the absolute perfect things and there isn't better, then they've removed all the reasons not to do it. So then go ahead and buy it. But the natural thing to do is to find a reason to not buy.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think when we talk about sales, you and I have had a discussion before about the psychology of sales. And you mentioned a game you played with your children and their pocket money.
It wasn't really a game, actually. Even when I was a youth leader, I used to do this with young people all the time. Got to make the other person think it's their idea.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. So the thing with my children and pocket money, after I got divorced and my children would come and stay with me at weekends, as is normal with most things, the conversation over pocket money came up. And one of the first weekends they came to stay. And I got 3 children. And one of them said, hey, times are tough. You don't need to give us pocket money. And one of his siblings kicked him onto the table and went, that'd be ridiculous. We'll get pocket money from both of them, which is fine.
Yes.
And, but I'd kind of deliberately planted some seeds in their head over, chores and things like this, because, you often witness people saying, okay, for your pocket money, you've got to cut the grass, or you've got to wash the dishes or take the dog for a walk or whatever it happens to be. And I just thought, I'm not going to go down that route with them. So over dinner, I suggested to them, I said, hey guys, because the pocket money conversation came up. And I said, I don't know, what do you guys think about pocket money? And then they discussed between themselves that because they were different ages, there should be a differential in what they receive.
Yeah.
And then they decided, we should do something for it. I said, that's a good idea. And so literally that was their idea. And then they each come up with what it was they thought was right for them to do to get their pocket money. And I said, I think you guys you've nailed it. You're spot on. And so I never had to monitor them. They monitored each other. They knew because they'd come up with it that they didn't deserve to get it unless they did it. So that's what I call selling. That's when the other, you plant the seeds, you give people the reasons to make them think that's my idea. So that's selling, as opposed to me telling them, you're not getting your pocket money unless you wash the bathroom or clean the bathroom or whatever. They'd never do it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting how you flipped the psychology around that. And we mentioned the Wolf of Wall Street earlier, and I think that's a lot of what Jordan Belfort does in his famous example with the pen. You create demand, you plant the seed, and then the sale's much easier.
Yeah, I mean, and the bit that was missed on that for most people was people kept trying to sell the actual physical pen.
Yeah.
As opposed to what the outcome of having a pen was. So if you said this pen has a particular color ink in it that if you sign this piece of paper is worth $1 million with green ink, and this is the only pen with green ink, well, you'll pay a lot of money for that pen.
Yeah.
But just saying that it's made of wonderful metal and it's a great brand, I mean, that doesn't sell the pen, because he keeps going around all the audience, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Because they didn't understand what selling is not the act. Selling's the outcome. It's not what's the physicality of what's there. That's what it does for you.
Yeah, I think that's missed by a lot of companies these days for sure. So you and I were chatting earlier and you mentioned you're launching a new venture this week. Perhaps you could tell me a bit more about that and what it is.
Yeah, sure. So the last couple of years, I've been a membership advisor for the Federation of Small Business.
Yes.
But I guess over the frustration of my career, when you moved beyond being a small business, which I did in previous guises, then there's a lot less help for mid-sized businesses and mid-sized companies. And there's almost an expectancy, well, those guys must know what they're doing because they've moved to that stage. But genuinely, there's very few places to go to for mid-sized businesses because they haven't got the affordability of large corporates to go out and hire all sorts of people to do certain things. So I'm launching a new service called Business by Invitation. And it is literally there to serve mid-cap businesses. So it's exclusively for 1 million plus turnover businesses. And it's really in recognition that businesses, when they get to that point, they genuinely need help to go beyond that. Where do I want to go next? How am I going to get there? And the motto for the business is learning in advance, not in arrears. Because all of what I've said to date is most of the things I've done, I've learned from hard lessons. Yeah. I've learned from mistakes. I've learned, and so wouldn't it have been wonderful if I'd known a lot of those things in advance? Yeah. Where do you go to get those? So that's really what BBI, Business by Invitation, is there to do. So it's based around the principle of collaboration and education in terms of what happens, and just facilitating for those business owners all of the education and information they need to know. And then where do you go to get the help for that?
Yeah, it sounds brilliant. I'm sure there's a huge demand out there, so I'm sure it'll be very successful. But what would you say some of the biggest challenges are that these mid-caps face? What are the sort of core problems that you think you'll be helping them to solve?
the problems in all businesses, actually, as they grow, despite size, is people.
Yeah.
Not a business owner you'll meet who basically won't say the more staff, the more problems. That's in terms of where it goes. So it's two things, really. Yeah, just because you've got your business to a certain size, you're then going to need help and support from other professional service providers, etc. How do you know how to instruct them? I'll give you an example. If you decided you're going to sell your business, and I can actually give you a live example of a friend of mine who sold their business recently. And when they sold their business, they typically turned to their existing lawyer and accountant and said, I'm going to sell my business, can you help? And they said, of course we can, because they could see a big payday.
Yes.
And, the accountant basically took on the M&A work, the merger and acquisition work, as well as the accounting work and providing of the data room material and things like this. And the lawyers took on all of the legal contract work. And they were good firms, not poo-pooing the firms, but they weren't the appropriate firms for the exit and tradition of where they were going. Whereas if he, as a business owner, had realized that, look, these are all the things that you need to put in place when you're looking to sell the animals, the people you need to go to in regards to what you're trying to do in advance and in preparation.
Yep.
That would have been a much smoother business sale. And he probably would have had a slightly higher valuation. I mean, he's still got a good valuation. So that's not really it's not so much about that, but it's the pain of going through it. So putting together the dream team, for want of a better description, as to how do you act, first of all, knowing who needs to be in that team. What do I need when I'm doing it? I do need a mergers and acquisitions guy. I do need a tax specialist. I do need to understand what my personal wealth situation is going to be afterwards.
Yeah.
So I need advice on that. I do need to understand about any potential things happening with the staff. Of course, I need to understand all of the legals and contract work and where's that going to go, what might happen. So getting the right team together that A, have the chemistry that can work with you, but equally can work with each other so they collaborate correctly to get the right outcome for you is just something most business owners just don't know. They just literally go to who they know and then they muddle through it. And nearly always when you speak to them down the line, a year or so later, they would say, if I was doing that again, there's no way I'd have done this and there's no way I'd have done that. Yeah. So that's, for me, that's really the key thing, is understanding what you need to know and then where do you go to get that help.
Definitely. And it can be very hard to know what you don't know and what you need to know. And I think what you said about bringing all these voices together makes a lot of sense, because you get a lot of advice, but often it's in isolation and it's not necessarily coming from the right perspective that you need.
So most advice you get is it comes from the people who want to sell you their service or their solution, as opposed to there being a genuine, impartial guidance as to what it is you need to do. And that's fundamentally what Business by Invitation is looking to achieve.
Yep.
Is that impartial direction over what you need to do. And one of the things that we'll be doing, for instance, is when someone identifies something that they need to do, we have this thing called the power of choice. So we essentially put together a panel or a beauty parade of the people we think would be appropriate to help and make sure the chemistry is right. We oversee that process and help them firstly understand what it is you need to do, but then also hold the hand, if you like, in terms of making the right appointments and seeing that team through. That's not something that I am aware of anyone else doing, because as you say, lots of people want to give you advice, but really what they want to do is to get your instruction. So they're telling you what it is they could do for you, as opposed to what's good for the client. Most people come at it from what's good for me selling you the service.
Yeah, so, definitely, and I'm sure it'll do very well. So as well as advising businesses, I believe you occasionally invest in other businesses. What are some of the key traits you look for when making investments in sort of founders, businesses, that sort of thing?
People, it goes back to the point I made earlier, so the fundamentals of any business have got to be sound in terms of, is there a market for it? Does the pain really exist? And is this a potential painkiller for that particular issue? If that exists, fine. Has the person got the tenacity and ability to be able to deliver in terms of what it is they're doing? So going back to some of those points. So it's people and idea really is key. I mean, the idea's got to be good, but the people are really more important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can have a bad business idea with a brilliant founder, and it'll probably be more successful than an amazing idea with a terrible founder, for sure.
Yeah.
So what are some of the books, resources, tools you've used to learn and develop over your career? Is there anything you could particularly point people towards that you think, this is brilliant, I learned a lot from it?
The book I've read the most, reread the most, is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He was where I first came across the concept of peer-to-peer masterminding. In other words, learn from your peers. And that whole principle of, well, you don't have to be good at everything. You just need to surround yourself with people who are good at those things.
Yeah.
So that was a phenomenally good book. Who Moved My Cheese? I've always enjoyed reading. It's a little thin, tiny book.
Yep.
And it's just that whole about, accommodating change. Don't be frightened of change. I mentioned about the successful exit, which was brought about by a change in, which was the overvaluation, or the increased valuation came about as potential change.
Yeah.
So change is your friend, not your enemy.
Mm.
So that's why I love Who Moved My Cheese, because it literally just tells it to a 5-year-old. I mean, I think anything that a 5-year-old can read and understand is always good. But yeah, those two books are I've really enjoyed. Actually, Wolf of Wall Street as a book. So I read the book long before the movie came out, and that was a very good book because Jordan Belfort, despite all of his failings, in terms of, or his addictions, shall we say, was probably what it was. The guy was a genius. Yeah. His ability to run rings around the SEC in the US with regard to what he was doing and what his business structure was. I remember reading the book on holiday, being very entertained because I bought it as a holiday read, not as a business book. Yeah. But I came away from it thinking, God, this guy's got this. He's so clever in terms of understanding the fundamentals of regulations and where it goes and how to always be ahead of the regulators in terms of what he was doing. So that's a really good read.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'll definitely add those to my list. And as you say, Jordan Belfort, a lot of people get distracted by all the glitz, the glamour, and there's a lot to learn from the core principles of what he did.
Yeah. So it's good.
So are there any passing words, advice, things you'd like to talk about and raise with the listeners as we near the end of our conversation?
Now, if you've got a great idea, go for it. Don't hold back. But there's no God-given right for it to work. And stop looking for investment. Try bootstrapping something. It's not someone else's responsibility to pay for your idea. And if you want someone else's money, just accept the fact they are going to make a multiple many times more than you're going to make out of it. Yeah. So, too many people think, I'll give them 5%. I mean, look, what's Dragon's Den? I'll give you 5% of my business for all your money because I'm currently not succeeding. Really? Yeah. So, go for it. If you, have a great idea, go for it. Bootstrap it as far as you can and prove that it works. And then if you need investment, great. Yeah. So, the chances of you becoming a unicorn are pretty damn slim.
Yes.
So stop thinking like that. Start thinking about just being successful at what you're doing.
Yeah, interesting. So I'll double click on that quickly. So you'd recommend just approaching stuff, bootstrapping it, going all the way, as opposed to trying to rush things, getting that investment, sort of prove the business case before you look to those further stages.
I think so. Yep. I mean, too many people think it's easy. That's the point about, I'm going to be an entrepreneur because there's going to be a hedge fund or a venture capital fund or a private equity person or someone is going to give me millions so that I can lose it. Well, that's what the investor thinks. They think they're going to give me millions so I can give them a better return than they get at the bank.
Yeah.
Well, that's just not the real world. So literally, bootstrap it, prove that you know how it works. And if you do want someone else's money, be realistic. They're going to take your pants down.
Yes.
And you got to expect to have your pants taken down.
Yeah.
And if you don't go with that attitude, then don't go there.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. You've got to be prepared to just sacrifice it and make it worthwhile for them as well as you, as we said earlier.
And taking other people's monies to do things as well, it's very, very inhibitive in terms of what you can do because they're going to control absolutely everything, including even if you sell. So if you're a venture capitalist fund, for instance, they're typically looking to make 4x on any investments they make, but that's on the collectiveness of their investments.
Yep.
And they're probably expecting 4 and 5 to fail, which means if you're the one that's working, your one has to not get 4x, it has to get 20x for them to allow you to exit. Yeah. So even though you think, well, I just did I'm at 7x, I'd love to get out. No chance made. Sorry, you're the one that's working. So you got to go and work harder to make up for all the failures. So it's not as simple as just taking other people's money.
Yeah. So be very careful when you look for funding.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Jim, it's been brilliant to talk to you today. I've definitely learned a lot and I think it's been a really interesting conversation. How can the listeners get in touch with you and find out more about your business?
Give you my email address, my telephone number, my LinkedIn profile. So anyone who wants to get in touch, just reach out.
Brilliant. It'll all be in the show notes. Thank you very much.
All right. Excellent. Thank you very much.